All right, welcome back to part 3, what I hope will be our last and final lecture for the week. So I'm going to try to talk fast, but as promised, we've got a lot of content to get through, and I want to make sure you are getting all of the bang for the big bucks you're spending to take this class. So we are talking about ways to observe students writing, and one way to do that is to actually observe students reading, because as previously discussed, reading and writing are very interactive processes. So students reading and spelling are related but not mirror images. The processes differ slightly. In reading, words can be recognized with many textual support, so reading ability actually lies ahead of spelling ability. Spelling is a conservative measure, which means if students can spell a word, then we know they can read the word, but it doesn't necessarily work the other way around. We can conduct a running record and observe for miscues. And then if student substitutes the word rabbit for bunny, you know they are using contextual cues, but not sound symbol correspondences, which would imply that they are somewhere in the early letter name alphabetic stage for spelling. And then the last thing to use for diagnostics for the area of spelling and writing is a spelling inventory. So it's recommended that you conduct a regular spelling inventory about 3 times a year, not any more than that, because then students will have an increased familiarity with the words. The list of words should consist specifically of words chosen because of having a variety of spelling features or patterns at increasing levels of difficulty. You want to examine the results of the assessment for the 3 functional levels, and those are what students do correctly or their independent level. What students use but confuse, that would be their instructional level where instruction is most helpful. And then what is absent in students' spelling, that would be their frustration level. So just like reading, when you give the spelling inventory, you want to examine the results to find their independent instructional frustration level. So Words Their Way is the tool of choice. It is going to be required next week. They have a primary spelling inventory for grades K-3. For kinder and those emergent readers, you can just give the first 5 words and based on their performance choose to discontinue if you're getting scribbles or letters that aren't in the word. For grade 1, it's advised that you give the first 15 words. For grades 2 and 3, you should give all 25. And if students get 20 right, you should move on to the ESI, or the Elementary Spelling Inventory, which is intended for grades 1 through 6. Discontinue if student is visibly frustrated or misses 5 in a row. And then there is also the option for the upper level spelling inventory, which is grades 5 through 12. And quickly, I just wanted to show them to you. So I put them up in the folder for this week. You have the assessment materials that goes over general directions. Then you have your primary spelling inventory. So there are the 26 words. You're going to read the word twice, use it in a sentence, and then when student starts to get frustrated or makes a lot of errors, discontinue. This is the feature guide that you would use to score it. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Here is the elementary spelling inventory, 25 words, a little bit different than the primary. There's the feature guide. And then lastly, the upper level spelling inventory. So those are your 3 options. You're going to want to consider the student's grade level and then also their ability level to determine which would be the best assessment to give. So steps for the spelling inventory: select the inventory based on student's grade and developmental level. Administer as if you would a spelling test. It should take about 20 to 30 minutes. Have the student number their paper. You may wish to do that in advance for younger kids. You want to pronounce each word naturally without drawing out sounds or breaking it into syllables. Say each word twice and use it in a sentence. Circulate and monitor student performance. When you see signs of frustration, be prepared to stop. And then afterwards, you will analyze the student spellings using a feature guide. And I put information on how to score on Titanium. So here's a sample student, Jake. This is the results from his spelling inventory. It looks like he did the ESI. So here we have his words that he wrote, and then it sometimes helps to write the target word next to their spelling just so you have that direct comparison there. And then what you're going to do from there is use the feature guide to score the words. So for example, the word bed was spelled right. So he got the initial consonant, the final consonant, and the short vowel. He has 3 feature points and then 1 point for spelling the word correctly. Same thing with ship. He had the final sound, the short vowel, and the digraph. 3 feature points and 1 point for spelling the word correctly. Now, when you start to see 2 errors in a category here, so 4 out of 5 for long vowels, 5 out of 7 for other vowels, this lets you know that's their instructional level. They are going to need some instruction here. So pretty simple, you just give the spelling test and then check off all the sounds that are present in their representation of the word. A couple notes on the scoring. Reversals should be noted but counted as the letter they were meant to represent. So if they have a static reversal where the B is written backwards in bed, you can count that, but you may want to note that they're reversing B's and D's. Kinetic reversals where they do FNA for fan, give credit for the consonants and vowels, but no point for correct spelling. And then, as said, instruction should begin where student makes 2+ errors on a feature. So that's how you know what stage is their instructional level. If you would like some more practice scoring, here are some sample students and their results. So you can score those on a feature guide and check out if you agree with words their way and how they scored them. So if you are not comfortable scoring your assessment right away, you can definitely use this for a practice opportunity. What the research says, according to the Cunningham article I had you read, which was very, very interesting, it consolidates a lot of data on multisyllable words. But their big conclusion was that students who learn to look for patterns in multisyllabic words will be better spellers and decoders. So that's the goal, is to teach them to look to patterns. Once they have that pattern awareness, then you can move on to meaning and morphology. Students learn word meanings from their reading, and both context and morphology are thought to account for a lot of their vocabulary development. In the article, it mentioned that English is one of the probably the language that relies on morphology the most, which is why we have words like bomb that has that silent B on the end. But when you look at words that are derivations of bomb, like bombastic, that B is actually pronounced. So English is actually really heavy on morphology and relationships with morphology. So successful decoding occurs when the brain recognizes a familiar pattern, or if no familiar pattern exists, it searches through store of words with similar patterns. And they also found that interventions focused on polysyllable decoding have been highly successful. So what does that mean for interventions? We need to be using strategies like Words Their Way that target specific spelling patterns and teach students how to analyze words and pay attention to those patterns. We also want to provide explicit explanation, systematic and explicit instruction, where we model, where we think aloud, where we practice. Teach students to ask the questions, do I know any other words that look and sound like this word that are going to help me pronounce or spell this word? Are any of these that look like or sound alike words related to each other? So thinking about relationships and morphology. Teach them useful prefixes, suffixes, and roots. So the article mentioned that the prefix inter is not prevalent in too many words, but the prefix in is, so it might be more useful to teach that prefix. All right, moving on to the QRI 5 word list. This is the last topic I want to cover. You will be giving this word list this week, and it will help you prepare for your last session where you are giving the QRI 5 in both narrative and expository. So the word list will let you know what level of passage to give your student at your final session. So please see pages 40 and 47 of the QRI for more info. The actual word lists start on page 100. Now, the word list provides a quick estimate for what level you should begin the testing. This is not a graded sight word assessment. Since these words are taken directly from the QRI passages, it is meant to be a quick assessment to give you a starting spot for the level of QRI passage you should start with. So this should not replace a sight word assessment or graded sight word list. So you give the student the list of words and ask them to pronounce them. You record the answers on the score sheet, differentiating between those automatically identified, less than a second, and those identified with some delay, 1 to 2 seconds. You guys should be really good at scoring these word lists since you've done it the week prior. Page 42 has the prompt under the instructions to the student section. More tips: begin with word list 2 or more grade levels below students' chronological grade. That way they're not being frustrated if they are below grade level. Keep track of their accuracy and automaticity. Write down the phonetic equivalent of any mispronunciation so you can analyze that. Write down SC if they self-correct, DK for don't know, C for correct response, and then again, if it takes less than 1 second, where you say 1/1000, record it in identified automatically, and if it takes longer than that, it just goes in identified. So page 44 has some samples of the score, or of the actual administration of that. So when you score it, you just count the number of words that were identified either automatically or not automatically. The total number correct will tell you what passage level to start with to assess the child's independent reading level. Whatever list you start at, not go up until you hit frustration, and go down in grade until you hit independent. So you may have to administer more than one word list. You should start 2 levels below their grade level and then go up until you hit frustration, go down until you hit independent. You should start with the passage at the student's independent level and then go up until you reach their instructional. So again, why we are doing this word list is to let us know what passage to work with for session 5. So the required assessments for this week for session 4: the words their way spelling inventory, the structured writing assessment, so you can do a dictated story, a prompted writing activity like All the Words I Know, or supported writing, which then you can analyze holistically, analytically, or with a checklist. And then lastly, the QRI 5 word list. Next steps: reading that article by Cunningham, reviewing designated pages of Lipson and Wixon. Check out the scoring guide for words their way. Read about the QRI 5, just 7 pages, which gives you more information about using the word list. You're going to need to upload your assessment artifact to the wiki for phonics and word recognition, and then complete the assessment reflection on the wiki, and then do your video submission, the second one, on phonics and word recognition, and then start to prep those assessments for spelling and writing. Woohoo! We are almost done home stretch. Just to launch you, I have a quote from the Cunningham article: "Those who set out to remember every letter, if every word, will never make it. Those who try to spell by sound alone will be defeated. Those who learn to walk through words with sensible expectations, noting sound, pattern, and meaning relationships, will know what to remember, and they will learn to spell English." So we really want to develop those tools and strategies so they're not trying to remember every letter, every sound, going letter by letter, sound by sound, but into chunks. So that is it for the week 6 content. Good luck with those spelling and writing assessments.